Welcome to Season 3 of the College Admission TV podcast. We explore the fast-changing space of AI, education, and the future of the workforce. In this episode, we're joined by President Robyn Hannigan of Ursinus College.
Welcome, everyone, for another episode of AI Education and the Future of Workforce. We have today with us President Robyn Hannigan, the 19th president for Ursinus College. Welcome, President Hannigan.
Thanks, JP. I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. I am fascinated with your background as an engineer. We don't get many of you with this depth of engineering background. You'll have, as a geochemist of all things, which is fascinating to me. What was interesting is your background. You have over 25 years of academic leadership. You've been a provost at other universities as well. You're a pioneer as a geochemist. You've done a lot of fellowships. You have a lot of patents. You have been involved in global advocacy for inclusive, sustainable, and diverse higher education. I'm very thrilled to have you on because obviously the core of AI goes to the heart of the technology and engineering and what have you. So I start with the easy question.
Okay.
How do you think AI is going to impact workforce in the future?
I think it's going to touch everything, right? So I can't think of, certainly there are some careers and some fields that are a little bit more AI proof. Like it's hard to replace a nurse, for example, with, a fully AI, right now anyway, a fully AI entity. But I think that what we're going to see is that we will have a partner in everything that we do, and someone who is going to do, and that someone or something is that AI, something that helps us do our work, helps us achieve discoveries and discover new things all the time. So I can't think of a single thing that it's not going to touch in some profound way.
So as you think about this, how, as liberal arts is a big part of your tradition as a university. How do you educate your students? Perhaps it's going to help our audience just to learn who your students are, what majors are they studying, and how are you equipping them for this new AI disruption?
That's a great question, because it starts with what the heck is liberal arts anyway? So a lot of people, perceive the liberal arts as it's, the performing arts or the fine arts. It's not. It actually derives from artis liberalis, which simply means those fields of study that are appropriate for a free mind or a free person. So that's anything from mathematics and physics to music to English, right? So it's every discipline. And a liberal arts education is really about teaching students how to think across those disciplinary boundaries, because that's where new knowledge is discovered, is at the intersection of those disciplinary boundaries. So, my phone went off. So that's why I think liberal education is actually in a moment of higher demand, because students have to be able to think across disciplinary boundaries and geographic boundaries in order to solve the emerging challenges that we have.
Interesting that you mentioned physics and mathematics. I think most people, when they think about liberal arts, I was a philosophy undergraduate, so humanities and social sciences, but it's almost going back to the old concepts of a Renaissance citizen.
Absolutely, yeah.
A Renaissance person. So really, what are some of the engineering fields, or I would say science fields, that you all focus on, and how do you leverage this very holistic approach in preparing students for this AI future?
So, I mean, I think one of the unique things about Ursinus in particular is the technology and design disciplines that actually cut across fields. So we have degrees in performing and visual art design and technology, which is really lighting design, lighting engineering, sound engineering. We have a music technology program. We have in our physics program, we have material science. So, but we are probably best known for our pre-med program. So we're incredibly strong in the biosciences.
And so obviously you're in a state that probably has the most per capita universities in the world.
Yep.
You know, what fascinates me, could you talk a little bit about your IDC, the Innovation and Discovery Center, and is that something that incubates some of these thoughts among students and faculty as well?
Absolutely. So the IDC, or the Innovation and Discovery Center, is really part of a holistic approach to education at Ursinus that we call APEX, which stands for Applied, Professional, and Experiential. It's where students learn to develop their entrepreneurial mindset and to actually solve problems from an entrepreneurial perspective. So that could be students that might be doing something like a business plan design competition. But it also is where students from the arts, the humanities, and the sciences get together to solve real world problems. So for example, where there's a question of hunger and how science can actually address the questions of hunger, there might be students from the philosophy department that are bringing in the ethics conversations. And so they're solving real world problems, getting hands-on experience, both locally and globally, through the IDC, and learning that entrepreneurial fail fast sort of mindset.
So I'm going to take a chapter from your pedagogy, which is your common intellectual experience that every freshman goes through. Very Greek in that sense, if you have to think about it. But, you know, I was actually looking at something. So what does it mean to be a human? How should we live our lives? What is our place in the universe? So just using that exercise through this podcast, which is what does it mean to now create intelligent being? And now we're actually creating intelligence is like never before. Are students asking these questions as part of the CIE?
Oh yeah, I mean, so the CIE is part of that first year experience. So students launch right away into conversations across really difficult, thorny topics. And what's cool about CIE is they do it through things like you said, like the Greek literature. So they'll read Persephone, which was written, thousands of years ago, and they'll try to understand what the world was doing at that time and how does that inform our decisions now. So they definitely dive into things like the ethics of AI. And if you are creating something that is intelligent, what's the boundary between something that is intelligent and autonomous, for example? And what would it mean to actually have an intelligent, autonomous, human-created being? And how would you have to manage the ethics of that? Or how would you appropriately deploy it in, say, solving a medical question? So they ask about not only how do they live together, but how do they live together with technology? How can technology improve their experience and what they're going to do in their work, but also how can technology become a barrier to success or to achieving, their goals?
So what, as you think about this, are you planning to develop or have you already developed strategies to address AI's impact on students' career readiness?
Absolutely. So through the APEX program, we have AI for everyone, which means that students are being introduced to different applications of AI through all the different disciplines that they're studying, and they can get micro-credentialed or credentialed in different generative AI for the arts, for example.
Hmm.
But we also have a corporate board that sort of informs us of how AI is influencing the work that people are actually doing. So, for example, we have a very large finance major, and many of those students go out and they work in the stock markets and in money management and wealth management. And AI is influencing everything that those people are doing. And so the employers are telling us, we need our entry-level analysts to be able to not only work with a Bloomberg terminal, through the Bloomberg lab, but they have to also be able to use AI to accelerate their work and to be able to work more effectively. So they also help us figure out how to incorporate those things into our curriculum in real time.
So you mentioned your board. What is the conversation the board is having around AI? I mean, how forward-looking is your board in terms of where they want to kind of see you leading the current and future students into this new reality?
I mean, it's the expectation of the board that whatever is the emerging need for the market, that Ursinus is at the front end of that. So our focus is preparing students to lead in emerging fields that we're not even aware of yet. So AI was always sort of on the front end of making sure our students were prepared to go into a world of work where AI is present. The board also recognizes that it's, AI is an opportunity. It's also a risk, right? So it also opens up new cyber risks that we also have to address. And so they've also been very focused on making sure that our risk management plans, in particular IT, cybersecurity, incorporate all of the risks that AI represents to the institution itself and the work that we do.
And just for our listeners, Ursinus has a very interesting program, which is the You Imagine Marketplace that your entrepreneurs actually focus on. So that seems to be a good incubator of really thinking about these areas, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you use the right word, incubator, right? It's where new ideas come and get discussed and torn apart, and new things emerge from it.
So you alluded to this, but I want to go a little bit deeper. So not every industry is going to be impacted equally. Obviously, we have compliance issues when it comes to healthcare, to some financials and patients' information. As you think about this, what barriers do you think AI is going to encounter as it relates to workforce changes?
I think the biggest thing is going to be running into the fact that our regulatory and our compliance ecosystem hasn't caught up to where AI is, right? So it's a lot like when we began to do genetic research in stem cells and in cloning, and our actual regulations around that hadn't caught up to the science. And so we're going to see a lot of AI pushing in that area, and us having to kind of pull the reins back on AI until we catch up as humans in terms of making sure that we've got the regulatory and compliance structure in place.
So currently, if you're an entrepreneur, you have some flexibility to experiment. At some point, it's going to get regulated, and there's going to be, and I think that's also, obviously, it takes time for regulation, but it also allows for some innovations to happen because we don't know. We don't know how information is being fully treated, how intelligent, and what fields we could get into. And so if you are, let's say, a humanities major, let's say you did what I did as my undergrad, you're a philosophy major. Yep. What is your future in this world?
I mean, I think philosophy is the perfect place for a student who's interested in the really thorny issues of how you manage a new intelligence and a new technology like this, because that's where the ethics is going to evolve, right? So understanding how to ask the right questions and what questions we should be asking about the ethical application of these technologies is where I see philosophy students spending a lot of their time. And then across, for our philosophy students, we also have our philosophy and religious studies programs are very tightly tied to one another. And so then it's also about, what does it mean to be human from a place of faith, and how does technology influence that? And that's what we saw also when we look at stem cells and cloning, the same sort of questions. So I see philosophy as, students getting really into more of the social science and humanities side of AI as we try to play catch up with this technology.
I mean, there's always this narrative that is happening. Obviously, we are a long way from, how John Dewey was thinking about. There is more and more, I would say, job pathways, like universities, and it's not just a serendipitous exercise into intellectual democracy, but every institution that I'm talking to is figuring out how do you marriage work with co-op, with internships, with workforce. Given a super competitive environment that Ursinus is in Pennsylvania, how are you differentiating and preparing students for the workforce?
Well, that's our Apex program, right? So the applied professional experiential, our first year students jump right in and they get a career coach, and they start talking about those different pathways, because you can end up, say, in healthcare from probably any major. It just depends on the path that you take and the directions that you take and where your passions lead you. So I think beginning with our first year students, having them really think about the multitude of opportunities, introducing them to different employment areas in the sectors they're interested in, having them spend some time shadowing externally. In our sophomore year, students also participate in a global sort of 2-week-long excursion where they go to a global innovator and they actually learn not only what's happening in that sector, but how does the difference of geography influence what they're doing. Then we have internships, co-ops, and so we want students to leave not only with their degree, but with a portfolio of experiences that demonstrate that they're ready to hit the road, and they're ready to emerge ready, right? So that's what Apex and Ursinus is all about, is from the time you arrive to the time you leave, we are in constant connection and communication about how to get you where you want to go, knowing that we're training students for fields that don't even exist yet.
Well, how do you think, if any, our education degrees or how we grant accreditation might change? Because I spoke to a university a couple of weeks ago. You could get a bachelor's in this college in 2.5 years. And so I know that this. Do you think this might impact how we do accreditations and how we prepare students because of AI and all the intelligence that's going to be available to us?
Certainly it's going to change how we teach, those individual courses. But I think higher ed overall really has to meet this moment. The market is sort of demanding that we prepare students differently, that we think about accelerated degrees, that we think about combinations of experience, prior learning credits, for example, or prior experience credits, apprenticeships, like really take the model that the United States adopted, from the Renaissance period, and actually rethink it for today's students. And AI is just one component, one partner in our ability to reimagine how we grant a college degree.
So when we go back 100+ years, and if we were back then, and we would say horse carriage jobs like coachmen, right, candle makers, lamplighters, right, blacksmith, handloom weavers, right? You start thinking about those jobs where, obviously we're still in the early 1900s, a farming economy. Obviously it evolved from Civil War all the way to, the early 1900s, but still a farming economy. When we look ahead of us, what jobs do you think are going to be antiquated because of AI disruption? If you had to pick a few that would be more immediately impacted, what would they be in your mind?
Well, I think data entry jobs, right? I don't need to pay someone to look at a piece of paper and type data in anymore. I've got a partner that I can say, here is, a data set, please pull out the following information, organize it in this way, and then hit a button and boom, that's done. I think a lot of, folks who, when you're writing and you're doing synthesis work, so I'm just thinking about research in the fields that I was in, I would have to read, 50, 60 journal articles to distill the one thing that I was trying to get out of it. I now have a research assistant that I can ask, hey, can you go and look at this information? And so the lower level research assistant that I might have used to hire, I no longer have to hire that because I have someone on board with me. But I don't think AI is going to replace as much as it's going to augment current jobs. That I think the current jobs are going to change. Your buggy whip buggy whip maker, they knew how to do leather work. And so if we could help them take that leather work and now design a new belt for the fashion industry, right? They're still doing the leather work, but they're just doing it for a different purpose. And I think AI is going to be a partner in that way. It's going to change how we do what we do.
So I was reading some old literature when I was doing research on this topic, and I was surprised of the amount of protests and strikes. So buggy wheel drivers, there were over 100,000 of them nationwide that were protesting the roads and the advent of cars becoming ubiquitous. As you know, we had ethanol lights all over the country, and those folks felt displaced. The thing was, at that time, obviously the standard of living was different. Life expectancy was a lot shorter, right?
Right.
And we had a long leash in terms of trying to re-educate the society. I mean, AI at the speed is coming. I mean, Industrial Revolution, if you go all the way back, let's say in the really started in 1830s and what have you, and it just went ahead for about 100 years. This might happen in the next 10 to 20 years.
Right.
So how do we adjust with all of these? It could be a lot more dynamic than that experience. And so, especially for, if you're in your 50s now, that's like being in your 30s, perhaps, in the old days, as far as the job experience. So how do we retool? So yes, part of it is it going to complement? Is it going to replace? Is it going to be a combination? And could we have a radical job displacement, at least for a little while, because self-driving car, if you're in San Francisco, Waymo, I see more Waymos in San Francisco than I would see Uber drivers now. And interestingly, the young people actually don't want to talk to anyone a lot of times. They actually prefer a self-driving car. So that's what scares people, right? So if we have to go for 15, 20 million job displacement from a customer service to taxi drivers to cab, all of this, even for customer service, right? How is higher education going to be a part of this strategy in making sure people are retrained? You mentioned the certificates, right? And you don't have to become a PhD AI specialist, but there are jobs that you could have with some small training, it sounds like.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that's really the role of higher ed, is to be a community support. And I think that, those institutions like Ursinus that were founded to be integral to the community have a responsibility, right? And we, developing those certificates, short-term, low dollar to free. I just think about, what Vanderbilt has been doing and the free courses that are offered to people who just want to develop some new AI skills. I think it's also incumbent on industry to think about what skills do their new workforce need, and how do we actually open those opportunities up to people who may be displaced in their jobs? And I'm hopeful, because we saw that a lot, with the computer industry coming along, and when the internet came, there was a lot of disruption. Like you said, though, the speed at which that disruption happened was significantly longer than what we have today. But I expect you'll see more and more higher ed institutions offering free or low dollar credentialing for folks to get some upskilling. And at the same time, I hope to see, when we think about when we imagine whatever the Department of Education could look like at the federal government, that it's tied to the Labor Bureau, right? And that as labor starts to change, that there's an expectation that higher ed will also have to change, or the education market in general.
I didn't know we have a Department of Education anymore, but that's good to know. But
whatever it looks like, yeah. You have to have something.
We'll have something. How does this change how or scientists, how will it change running a university? Everything from operation to pedagogy. Where do you see you all in the next 5 to 10 years? I know it's a very loaded question, but how do you think about that?
I mean, I think we're going to see AI technologies integrated into all of our operations, right? We already are seeing it on the HR side, on the finance side. The enterprise systems that we use have AI embedded in it to make the processes go more smoothly, to help us with reporting more quickly. We're seeing already AI integrated into admissions, and AI tools that are interacting with students as they start to explore our website, or just explore college in general. I think that, our faculty are looking at where AI can be helpful in terms of accelerating students building skills and helping them gain knowledge, and making sure that we're also, training our students in the different AI applications within disciplines, because they're all unique. So I see in 5 years that it's going to be, rather than having like what we have now, which is sort of a one-off, like there's an AI system that lives over in this particular, enterprise piece. There's another AI system that we use for teaching or something. I think that we'll see an ecosystem of tools that are AI-based, that are operating across the institution, supporting the work of everyone. That's what I expect to see anyway.
Well, so that was the easier question. Let me ask you the more holistic question in terms of, as we think ahead, what is your thought, not just in terms of higher education, but the last 12 years, the K-12 education system? If you had your way, how would you think about the classroom setting, the prep work before a student? What would be ideal for a student that comes to Ursinus? What kind of training do you think they need to have so you could actually take him to the next level?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think we're seeing, particularly since the pandemic, a skills gap in the students that are coming into college. And what I want to make sure is that any student who comes into our college, or any college, has the foundational skills in being able to critically assess information. So that could be not only your reading, writing, and your arithmetic, right, but also understanding, some data literacy, understanding facts and how you derive facts from information. So that when they come into a place like Ursinus, which, as I said, is really all about applying knowledge across disciplinary boundaries, that they have the foundational skills to be able to do that, and they have the confidence. I think that's the big thing for us, is the learner confidence, that you may not know something right when you start, but you are confident that you have the foundational skills to be able to gain the knowledge. And that's where I think Ursinus does exceptionally well, is no matter how the student comes into us and what experiences they've had before, we get them where they need to go as quickly as we possibly can. So I also think I would love to see more high school students do what some high schools do, which is require some work experience, right? Where they actually get out in the world and they get a sense of what it means to do work in 2025 or 2030. And that can help shape the sorts of experiences that they seek when they go to college.
How does this, do you think this is going to, how does this impact your leadership?
Well, it requires that I pay attention a lot more to what's going on in the technology sphere. And because of the speed of change, I have to, constantly keep my foot on the gas in terms of the conversations we're having on campus, and that we can't, because of how fast the technology is changing, we can't be complacent and say, all right, we launched an institutional-wide AI system, which we did. We have AI for everyone and a minor and all, okay, we're done. That's not the way this technology works. And so we're never actually going to be done innovating and integrating it into the work that we do. So it just requires a lot more vigilance, I think, than maybe other technologies would have, just because of the pace of change.
For our parents and our listeners, what do you want to leave them with in terms of, as they're looking at their next education, this destination, what should they think about when they think about Ursinus, and seriously consider a destination for education for their kids?
I mean, when you think about college, and there's no question that the return on investment on a college degree is substantial, not only in your earnings, but in your health and your well-being, throughout your life. So first, I always say, what really matters most is fit. How do you feel on the campus? How does the campus fit you as a student in where you want to go? Some students thrive in large environments. Some students thrive in small environments. For students that come to Ursinus, students who come to us are typically risk takers. They're willing to try things. They're comfortable with unknowns and living in the gray. They are, like I said, they're risk tolerant. They're also very community focused. In other words, they like working as members of teams and solving problems as teams. They enjoy, they're not necessarily wed to, I'm only going to be a medical doctor, right? I'm going to be a medical doctor who is fluent in French. I'm going to be a medical doctor. So they really want to explore not just one single discipline, but they want to explore the world of knowledge in a way that's going to get them where they want to go. And it's a small community. We have 1,500 undergraduate students. And so it's a community where you can, be yourself and your entire self is embraced, but we're also supporting you as an individual in where you want to go. And we evolve with you while you're with us.
President Hannigan, we've been enlightened. We have really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very, very much.
Appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the College Admission TV Presidential Podcast. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll bring you another insightful conversation with a distinguished leader in higher education.